Nintendo has dug themselves into a hole, a very, very dangerous hole. And when everybody came to their rescue and tried to help them out, they looked at all those people, telling them how to get out of the hole. And the only thing they thought was that they needed a bigger shovel. And that is because Nintendo has responded after people have pretty universally come out to criticize them for a lot of their decisions regarding the Switch 2, primarily the price point of the console, and especially the price point of the game. And amidst all of that criticism, some of the things that they have come out and said, some of the ways that they are defending their decisions, does not just make them sound tone deaf, it confirms that they are. It confirms that their hubris has gotten way out of hand. And it is some of the craziest stuff that I have ever heard from different executives in gaming. And I've covered a lot of Ubisoft and EA. But before we look at those responses, I want to talk about a quick thing that might not seem related now, but you'll see. So I want to read you guys the definition of a fallacy known as circular reasoning. Circular reasoning, or circulus indemonstrando. This is a type of reasoning in which the proposition is supported by the premises, which is supported by the proposition, creating a circle in reasoning where no useful information is being shared. This fallacy is often quite humorous. In its logical form, it can be understood that X is true because of Y, and Y is true because of X. Sorry for that interruption, but now that we're done with it, let's look at these quotes from Bill Trinan, who is the Vice President and Head of Player and Product Experience at Nintendo of America. When asked about the price of Mario Kart World being $80 for its digital edition, its physical edition still to be confirmed in some territories and confirmed to be the equivalent of $90 in many other territories, he had this to say: I would say it's less about the strategy of pricing Mario Kart World, it's more just whenever we look at a given game, we just look at what is the experience, and what's the content, and what's the value. And honestly, this is a game that is so big and so vast, and you will find so many little things in it to discover, and there's still some other secrets remaining that I think as people end up buying and playing the game, they're going to find this to be probably the richest Mario Kart experience they've ever had. And so in this quote, and some others that we're going to see in this video, Bill here is saying that Nintendo isn't pricing the game at $80 to change the industry. They just look at the game and decide what's the value of it based on how good they think it is. And trust me guys, when I say that we know that the value of the game is high because we've played the game and we know the value of the game is high, so you should pay the value of the game that we say is high. And you know what's the saddest part about all of this? And since we're on the topic of logical fallacies and stuff like that, I want to apply one of my favorite things, which is the philosophical razors. I really like to apply Hanlon's razor everywhere in my life, which says that you should never assume malice where there can be stupidity. However, to me, the word stupidity is just a little bit malicious, so I like to change it to ignorance. And I think that it applies to Nintendo here. I think that they aren't doing this with evil in their hearts. They're just genuinely this delusional and unaware of how much they are about to destroy so much of the video game industry. And I'm going to show you exactly how that's going to happen. Which, by the way, hi, I'm Mug. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to cover these topics: the slippery slope of pricing, all the different ways Nintendo is trying to justify this and how they make no sense, how Nintendo is just being greedy, I have receipts, the lasting impact that this is going to have, and number 5, we're going to look at how this will damage Nintendo, not just the industry. And we're gonna refute a lot of the different claims that people have that actually the Switch 2 is gonna be amazing and will not suffer because of these decisions at all. There's handy dandy chapters down below if you want to skip to anything, but I would strongly appreciate it if at some point in the video you hit the like button. That YouTube really likes that. And while we're at it, you can think about subscribing if you like essays and reviews and news of video games and stuff, okay? But you don't have to do it now. Do it when you consider that it's good, all right? Just later. Let's get into it. So Nintendo has decided to exercise their power, which they do have, of pricing their games however they feel like. And here's a very hard truth we need to accept right at the start. This is how the market works. They decide the price of stuff, and then people decide if they're willing to pay it for that or not. While I think that $80 or even $90 for video games is ridiculous, and it has a lot of problems on how video games work that we're going to look at in Chapter 4 of this video, my main issue is not with people charging more for games. It's with how they are choosing to justify that price change. This is the slippery slope, as Doug Bowser himself says. What you see right there is variable pricing. We'll look at each game, really look at the development that's gone into the game, the breadth and depth of the gameplay, if you will, the durability over time, and the replayability of gameplay experiences. Those are all factors, and there's many more that go into consideration of what is the right price point for the game. So I think you can anticipate that there will be variable pricing, and we haven't set a benchmark. He sets the example of how Breath of the Wild was $60 and Tears of the Kingdom was $70, which at that point was the new standard for most games because that's how much time there was between those two games. And he uses the standard of pricing that everybody else set at that time as an example of Nintendo's unique strategy of variable pricing. And that's where he continues to really highlight the danger of all of this. I think that for us, that's really how we want to proceed and go forward. I can't speak for other games that might be released by other publishers or other platforms. It's more about what we think is right for our content. What is the right value for the consumers as they come into our platform? Doug Bowser, in that sentence, just set up on a silver platter the opportunity for every other publisher in the world to start charging $80, $90, $100 for their games. Because when we break down all of this mumbo jumbo, what it really comes down to is that a game should be priced according to the value of the game, on how good it is, on a bunch of different factors. How much was spent on development? How good did the final product come out? How enjoyable is it? How replayable is it? How much does it offer to the customer? Kind of this old bullet list style system that we used to have of, oh, this game comes with multiplayer even if it's garbage, that's $10 more on the box type of mentality. The problem is that the people deciding that value is them. So this comes with a whole host of problems, obviously. Even if we ignore the many number of different variables within game development that could be used as excuses to raise the price of a video game, let's just focus on what's here right now. Mario Kart World is a premium video game. Its quality is $80. Donkey Kong Bananza? That's a lesser game, man. That game's only $70. It's not as good. That is what this is saying. The variable pricing is on what makes sense to us of the value the game offers to our consumers in exchange for their money. So now let me ask you a very simple question. What publisher, what human wants their games to be immediately perceived as lesser value, as non-premium? Do you guys think that when Borderlands 4 launches on Nintendo Switch 2, it's going to cost less than Mario Kart World? Do we think that 2K Games and Randy Pitchford are willing to announce to the world with their price that they are not as full of value to the consumer as Mario Kart World? Of course not. Mario Kart World has $80, maybe even $90 of value to a consumer, and GTA 6? Oh, that's probably like $120 of value to the consumer. And the consumer is not the one that decides it. It's the people making the game based on whatever they feel like. I find it hilarious that if at least we were looking at this situation from the perspective of a game's price will be decided by how much it costs to develop. I don't think that's a correct formula at all, but I could at least accept it. It would, in my mind, make some sort of sense. But this idea of a game should be priced based on, essentially, how good it is, how much replay value, how much you get out of the game is ridiculous to me, because then we should have all paid like $150 for Baldur's Gate 3, a game that came out at $60 in the times of the $70 game, by the way. By that same token, I should have paid like, what, $400 for Balatro? Should have paid like $1,000 for Factorio? Got 400 hours in Marvel Rivals. Should I be paying a monthly subscription of $50? And I know somebody out there right now watching this video heard me say that and said, well, that's what they are worth to you, but those games aren't worth anything to me because I don't like them. To which I want to say, exactly. At the end of the day, these pricing structures will work if the consumers that like the games being priced that way consume them. If they go out and buy them, they will be justifying that price tag. The danger that comes with that, with not complaining about these changes, is that the way that the industry is standardized in its prices and how that is the equal playing field for competition has now dramatically shifted, with the new price point being if you don't cost the same as Mario Kart World, that is because you are admitting that your game is less premium. Unless you're a Baldur's Gate 3 and you can prove that you are equally premium, and then if for some reason you're charitable to people. So let me end this chapter off with a very clear message. This isn't just raising the prices of video games to a new standard at which everybody has to position themselves in equal quality and value as what Nintendo has decided is a new price point. This is also opening the door for other people to raise the price further and justify that by saying that their game is worth it because they say so. And I can think of quite a few companies that are eager to do that, especially when the competition that they're placing in front of them is Mario Kart World. No offense to Mario Kart. I love Mario Kart, okay? It's just like, let's be real for a second. But now we move on to a very interesting question. Why would Nintendo do this? Some of you immediately answered that question with greed. And congratulations, you're correct. But a lot of other people are saying that inflation, that they have to adjust their prices to that, you know, the employees and the people who work at Nintendo need to make a living and they should be properly compensated for their talent and the excellent games that they make. Which is a really funny thing to say because it implies that in recent years with the Nintendo Switch operating as it has, a console that is incredibly old at this point, that they haven't been making money in the last years when they have. Hand over fist. There's this very rarely often used expression that I'm sure that most people have never heard before. It's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Nintendo had an excellent price point from the launch of the Switch and an excellent price point for their games by keeping them accessible to the majority of people, by making sure that the Nintendo Switch was appealing to as many people as possible. And they have decided to price themselves out of that accessibility, because it doesn't matter how much you want to adjust for inflation. The reality is that most people's cost of living has gone up way more than their overall earnings and wages have. It doesn't matter what the little inflation calculator says, the truth is very different and you have to go out there and experience it for yourself. Not to mention that this is something that affects the entire world, not just whatever microcosm we are in. This is why, effectively, the $450 starting price for the Nintendo Switch 2 is pricing themselves out of a very large demographic that they have dominated for many years. And they are aware of this, and they are still doing it because they're greedy. How greedy are they? Well, enough to call us broke boys. Good old Doug Bowser said that we recognize there are some people that may not be able to afford the Switch 2. That's why we wanted to make the other Switch platforms available. Oh, what's that? The Switch 2 is too expensive for you? Don't worry, we're gonna keep updating the Switch 1. Just go buy that. Just buy something from me. That's all I really care about. All right, thanks. People quickly all over the internet, they compared it to Don Matrick in 2013 at the announcement of the Xbox One, when they were criticized for having a console that required an online connection to do pretty much anything. And Matrick responded by saying that if you don't have an internet connection, Xbox has a product for you. It's called the Xbox 360. And so Doug Matrick was born. The point is that Nintendo is acutely aware not just about the price of the Switch 2, because they were very informed by literally everyone on the planet shouting drop the price at them, but they're aware that they're pricing themselves out of a significant demographic for which they still have the Switch 1. And trust me, the comparisons to the Xbox One continue here to a certain degree because a lot of the Nintendo Switch 2's whole game plan is about its connectivity. It's about Nintendo finally reaching the internet era and making that a central focus. They have harped on and on about how Nintendo Switch Online is an integral part of the Switch experience. So much so that they have reconfirmed multiple times that the C button that activates game chat will not work if you don't have Nintendo Switch Online. You can't reprogram it, you can't rebind it, you can't make it work as a different button. You either have Nintendo Switch Online and it's the game chat button, or you don't have it and it's the "we're going to advertise game chat to you" button. A dedicated button to remind you that you're not paying to use the button. What's even worse than that is that probably some people will be confused as to what their C button is supposed to do. But don't worry, because Nintendo has you covered. The Switch 2 has a fantastic interactive manual to teach you everything about the console, very similar to Astro's Playroom for the PS5, except that this manual that will teach you stuff about the console costs $9.99. Many people have criticized this, but Nintendo has defended it by saying that it is not an exorbitant price. If you're a broke boy, just say so. Bill Trinan, very similar to what he said about Mario Kart World, and just the amount of detail in that game is worth $80, has said that the Welcome Tour for Nintendo Switch 2 has a lot of great detail in there. It's a pretty robust piece of software. For the people who care about the manual for the console, they're really going to love this product at $9.99. It's good value for what you're getting, and this is where that famous Reggie Fils-Aimé quote has originated from, where Reggie said that he had to convince Nintendo Japan, he had to beg them to include Wii Sports as a pack-in for the Wii, considering how new and strange a lot of the technology of the Wii was. And I guess that since the Switch 2 is just the Switch but better, we should charge them for that little introduction of it. But don't worry guys, there's a ton of Nintendo charm in everything regarding Switch 2 Welcome Tour, as this video from Video Games Chronicle shows off, with mini-games as exciting as Guess the Frame Rate, so that people can distinguish between 60 frames per second and 120. How can we look at these things and not see the greed? That is my question. And how can we not see that the greed has passed over the line of what is acceptable? And on top of all of this, they've confirmed that the Switch 2 cartridges taste bad, like the Switch 1. That is definitely a bridge too far. What, there's got to be like a moment of levity in the video, okay? That's the best I had. Oh, I hope that was funny, because the next two parts of the video much less funny. It's the economics of stuff. It's important, okay? The Switch 2 is setting a standard for what video game prices should be, as well as setting a standard for how they should be calculated. How to objectively, that's not possible by the way, but let's roll with it, right? Objectively evaluate the value that a game has to some percentage of the people who would theoretically be interested in the game. Nintendo might have done this in their ignorance, not realizing what they were doing, but the truth is that once the genie is out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. Once this conversation has been out there in the open, you can't silence it. Even if Nintendo were to backpedal right now and say that actually that pricing is a mistake and that Mario Kart World is going to cost $70. We've all experienced that initial shock of the price changing. We absorbed it, we discussed it, we were disgusted at it while discussing it, but now we are more mentally prepared for what is to come. The next time it comes around, we will continue to be angry, we will continue to point out how problematic it is, but we will be more willing to accept it, because that shock, Nintendo was the one that gave it to us. Because I do think that if they lowered the price, they would overall be winning more, because more people would not just have a very positive impression of Nintendo as a company willing to admit their faults, but that new price would make it accessible for people and it would sell more. And that is the most important part of all of this. The lasting change that comes from this is that once that genie is out there and the prices increase, a lot of what gaming is changes forever. And that's because there is this invisible threshold, whether we realize it or not, and sometimes it's very difficult to realize it because we all live in our own personal bubble. And what certain amounts of money mean to each of us is very individual and dependent on our own life circumstances. But there is a threshold between gaming being a relatively cheap, accessible, and very value-driven hobby that is always appealing and interesting to everyone, and gaming being an expensive hobby, one that is reserved for the people who have not just the time, but the money as well. And while we can say that gaming has always been an expensive hobby, it is now that we crossed that threshold that we can look back on it and say that it never was truly that expensive. It's more that it had the potential for people to spend way too much money on it, but if you wanted to have a very satisfying time, have a ton of fun with video games, really get invested deep into the hobby and enjoy just a ton of amazing experiences, you didn't need to spend that much money to stay up to date with current releases. This is the moment that the cheaper, more toy-like company releases their latest toy at a much higher price. This is the point where games for that console go up, and it would be pretty logical to assume that other games for other consoles that are more the big expensive ones are going to cost even more. The $450 Switch 2 with its $80 to $90 games means that in 2 years nobody's gonna bat an eye at the $700 PlayStation 6 and its $100 games. And that's if that doesn't happen sooner rather than later on the games front. That changes so much of the perception of the hobby. It might seem minor, but when it comes to the overall perception of things, it's the difference between signing up to the baseball club or the golf club. And the final result of it all is going to be that gaming as a whole will be less popular, and it will shift and change in ways that I don't like. This is the type of thing that makes free-to-play more appealing. This is the type of thing that makes phones and mobile gaming more appealing. This is the type of thing where less parents are going to be willing to introduce their children into video games because they perceive it as an overly expensive hobby that they don't want them to have. And we'll be able to see how all of that is true when we see that the sales figures for the Switch 2 are not going to be great. I've seen plenty of people say that none of this matters, that the Switch 2 will sell wonderfully and everybody will have to eat crow, that none of it matters, that Nintendo wins regardless. And they point to different sources of evidence, like some of the pre-orders that have opened up around the world, selling out within very small amounts of time. And just the same as people who said that the price of the Switch 2 was decided because of tariffs, just for Nintendo to come out and say, no, it's not because of the tariffs. Actually, we have to wait and recalculate based on tariffs now. People will soon realize that of course it sold out because it's the new Nintendo console. But how many people do you think are buying the Switch 2 at launch for their kids or something? It's tech enthusiasts, it's reviewers, it's YouTubers, and it's diehard Nintendo fans, a company that historically has had way too many diehard fans willing to buy everything that they do and scalp them. This is a company that could sell out plastic figurines with an NFC chip. Of course, the diehard fans are going to consume everything that they do, including the Switch 2. It's going to sell out day one. But that's because of the supply that's going to be available on day one. What happens when we reach the holiday season? What happens when, during the holiday season, less and less people are buying it because it's too expensive? Because a large part of the Switches and the Wii's demographic, which are casuals, don't want to buy it because it's too expensive and the games are also way too expensive. What happens when the Switch 2 isn't the hot commodity of Christmas? Well, one of the options that wouldn't be new for Nintendo is for them to cut the price, which they did with the 3DS, and they turned that whole thing around. And look, great for them. It's a very safe and sound strategy, right? You get to charge the most to your diehard fans that are willing to do anything for you, and then when things aren't going your way, you finally listen to the majority that said that it was too expensive and you just cut the price. And then hopefully you turned it around like you did the 3DS, and you make a lot of money up front, and then you have a successful, long-lasting product afterwards. And the people who get screwed are the first adopters. What a surprise. But what I think is even more probable and more worrying is that they don't. That this is the price and they stand by it, and if you're a broke boy, just say so. And then that very wide spread of gaming. This idea of anybody can just go and buy a Switch and it's a great way to get into gaming, to start enjoying the hobby, to experience wonderful things. slowly and slowly starts to get gate-kept by prices and prices, and gaming goes from this wonderful thing that everybody should be able to enjoy into an elitist club of people with too much money to spend. There is a threshold, and for as much as you can take out whatever calculator you want and say that the $450 of the Switch 2 isn't very far from the $300 of the Switch 1, if you adjust for inflation, that's not how things work. $450 is a lot of money for people who are today struggling to keep up with inflation because their jobs don't pay as much, or because the small increases that they have seen at their jobs are now being spent on how the average cost of living has very quickly changed according to inflation, and now they have even less disposable income than they had. And I do truly believe that not only are we crossing that threshold now with the Switch 2, and that, as I've made clear in this video, it sets up a very, very scary future for other consoles and for games in general, it's all that much worse because it's being done by Nintendo, the company that everybody just kind of understood to be fun games and that's it. The cheaper, accessible, fun console. The one that you buy your kids. And they're the ones changing all of it. Now, what'll happen with all of this, I do not know, but I always try and stay as optimistic as possible with everything. And it's one of the staples of the channel. If you're new here, welcome. Yeah, we're gonna get into some good stuff. And for me, the most important silver lining of the entire situation is that people are making their voices heard, and hopefully that will translate to sales. People screaming during the entire Nintendo Treehouse to drop the price in chat is poetic, but it is exactly what we have to do. Boycott, complain, make it clear that these prices are not acceptable and that they are pricing people out of enjoying their hobby. And to see that Nintendo is at least listening and panicking at it is very good. At the end of the day, video games will survive in one way or another because competition will remain and it will be healthy. And hopefully, because of that competition, other alternatives, be that Xbox's hybrid or the Steam Deck if Valve somehow wants to try and court the casual audience or something, or some other product will exist to offer alternatives and keep things in line while still pushing forward this medium we all love. I truly believe that. Nobody's ever going to stop me from playing a ton of indie games and having a great time no matter what. I just think that Nintendo has made that road much more difficult for them, and maybe for all of us. I hope that whatever happens, we make our voices heard, and that Nintendo, and everybody, learns a valuable lesson. Having said all of that, I've been Mug. And if you enjoyed this video, if you found it entertaining, informative, in some capacity made your day better, consider hitting that like button. It helps the channel grow, helps the video reach more people, which is amazing because it means you think more people should watch this, and also because you watched it. And that is the coolest thing that could ever exist in life, in my humble opinion. I'm still over the moon every single day that people choose to watch these videos, so thank you. If you want more from me, including news, reviews, and of course essays and retrospectives, things like this very video, subscribe. We have a ton of reviews coming up soon, and of course that subscriber number helping the channel grow means that there's going to be even more news and reviews directly correlated to that number getting bigger. So welcome if you choose to do so. And speaking of supporting this channel and making dreams come true, a very special thank you to the people on the $1 wall, be they patrons or members here on YouTube that support everything that I do directly. I thank you so very much every day. And no matter what chaos, drama, or excessive greed is happening out there in the world, remember to go out there and enjoy some great video games. And I will see you again very soon.